going to do a short demo on Brussels sprouts. It's in season at this point. It's a beautiful side dish. It's a great side dish for your December meal when you're hanging out with family. It's very warm and very comforting, and a little bit of a different take on it. So I know that the recipe was not everyone. So go ahead and take that, modify it. Always look at your recipes, and you can always add a little more syrup or take out a little bit of Dijon. But we're gonna make this together. So what I do want to start with is, as we're looking at the cutting board right here, so I have, this is going to be a bacon maple Brussels sprout, right? So right here, I have already cooked my bacon off. So I cut it up into these small pieces, just cooked it in the pan, so that's ready to go. If you look at the recipe, you'll notice it doesn't call for oil. That is because we have all this beautiful bacon fat sitting at the bottom, and we're going to use that as our oil, as our flavor for this dish. So once the bacon is ready to go, once it's ready to go, we're going to turn the heat off. We're going to cut up our onion, and we're going to cook it in the pan without heat because our pan is hot. Okay, so when our pan is hot, what I don't want to do is burn the bacon while the onions are cooking. So you want to undercook the bacon a little bit and then remove it from heat, and then just kind of let it sit in the bacon fat. And then while that's happening, we're going to talk about some techniques called blanching and then shocking. So first things first, we're going to start with the onion right here. So as we are on the cutting board here, I'm going to show you how to cut it into a small dice so we get nice, even cuts out of this. First thing, I'm going to keep the root on, okay? This is going to help hold the whole onion together. And I'm going ahead and then very carefully, I'm going to use a flat hand so I don't cut myself. Putting it on the cutting board, I'm going to come in and create a couple different layers right here, okay? I'm not going all the way through. So you can see if I were to pick up the onion, it's not going to fall off. This is because we keep the root intact, which is going to help it hold together, okay? Next step is I'm going to come in and make about 1/4 inch cuts all the way down the onion. Same thing, I'm not going through to the top. I want to keep the onion together so it can do all the work for me. It's going to hold it together for me, okay? And then from here, once I have my 1/4 inch lines, I'm going to come and turn it sideways and then come up about 1/4 inch. Why is it very important to get everything the same size? It is absolutely crucial to get all of your knife cuts close to the same size so it cooks evenly. If I were to have one really big onion and some small onion, the small onion is going to burn before I get to the big onion, right? So the other benefit of this is when you come down to the end here, it's all held together. So anything that's left, you can get the most out of the onion by coming in with your knife and chopping along the sides. So after cutting the onion, this is the only waste that I have right here, which is a very beautiful thing. All right, so bacon's cooking. I have some nice hot oil right here, as we can see that. I just turned it on for a little bit. I'm going to remove from heat and set my onions in there. Give me 2 seconds. Anytime I scrape anything on the cutting board, I want to make sure I flip my knife over. What this does, ooh, that's a beautiful sound. You can hear it sauteing in the oil. Again, off of heat. That pan is hot. I want the onions to cook low and slow while we're getting our Brussels sprouts ready. But what I was just saying is anytime you scrape anything off of your cutting board, you don't want to use the sharp side of your knife because then it dulls. So if you flip it over, you're not going to dull the knife and it will stay sharper longer. So I'm going to give this a quick stir, let the onions kind of sweat and saute. And I'm looking for a translucent color here because we are going to throw the Brussels sprouts in and cook it. Translucent means no brown, but it's almost see-through. You can kind of start to see through it like the window a little bit. While that's cooking and happening, we are going to go ahead and get our Brussels sprouts ready. This is what we're aiming for with the Brussels sprouts, and I'll show you with these 2 examples right here. Brussels sprouts, first thing you want to do is rinse them off. Any vegetable you get, you want to rinse it off to make sure that there are no chemicals or any contaminants on the outside before you put it on the cutting board. Because I want to cut things on this cutting board. I don't want to put dirty food on here, cut it, and then remove, and then keep using the same cutting board because as soon as I put something else on here, it's going to get dirty. Okay, so Brussels sprouts here. So this has already been rinsed. And then the next step with the Brussels sprouts, you want to take the outer layer off. Anything that you see that's dirty or bruised, right here you can kind of see a little bit of bruising on the Brussels sprout. I want to make sure I get that outer leaf off till it looks unblemished. Okay. Same thing with the little one. So this is probably the most time-consuming part of this whole process. You want to pick through your Brussels sprouts and make sure if you have the perfect ingredient, you'll have the perfect dish. From here, next 2 steps. So I have 2 sizes, and what I wanted to show with this is first, you're going to take this root, this base off right here, because it's very woody, it's very fibrous, and it's very chewy. It's not something that's going to break down. So we want to get rid of this section right here so that we're not putting it in our mouths and chewing on it forever and ever and ever, right? Same thing with the little one. Other benefit of this, it keeps it from rolling around your cutting board. Now I have a flat surface to work with, which is a good thing. So I have two different sizes. As you can see, I have a big one and a small one. How am I going to cut them? It's very hard to put this in a recipe. You can say cut into quarters, cut into halves, but I want them all to be the same size. So I'm going to take the little one and I'm just going to cut it in half. You can see the inside. It almost looks like a tiny little head of cabbage here with all the layers, okay? And then with the big one, I'm going to cut it into quarters. Why? This comes back to a point I was just talking about earlier. I want them all to cook evenly. If I were to leave this in a half and have this size and this size in the pan sauteing, this one's going to cook and burn before this one's ready to go. So that's why I'm going to cut it into quarters so we're close to the same surface area and volume. Very important when you're cooking. All right, next step. So behind me, I have a pot of boiling water. I know you can't see it right here, but there is boiling water in there. It has a pinch of salt in it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this bowl of all of my cut Brussels sprouts and I'm going to put it in the boiling water for 1 to 2 minutes. Times are very difficult in recipes because depending on the size that you cut it and how hot your water is and how your stove is working, you have to pay attention to it. This is going to be the blanching method. So what I'm looking for here is I need it to be, I'm looking for everything to turn bright green. I want it to par cook. I want it to start to cook. And then we're going to finish it in the pan. All right, looking at my Brussels sprouts right here, it's starting to turn a little bit bright green. I just want that vibrant green. I don't want to overcook it so it starts to turn mushy. I just want to get that color to start to pop here. We are almost there. I'll bring it back over to the cutting board. At this point, I'm going to move my bacon and onions back over to heat. I'm going to start heating that pan up low and slow. Again, I don't want to burn the bacon. I don't want to overcook the onions, but I do want to start heating it up so that I have a warm pan to put the Brussels sprouts in and toss it all together. Okay. And I will show you a couple of onions before I add the Brussels sprouts. They're getting really close to translucent. That means you can almost kind of see through them. They start to get a little bit clear, a little bit opaque is the word there. Okay. All right, next big step. All right, so we can just see the edge of it. I don't want to set this on the cutting board. I was looking at this in the camera. You can see the Brussels sprouts are starting to turn bright green. Okay, that's the color that I want. I don't want to cook them all the way through. I want to cook them about 80% of the way through. They've turned this vibrant bright green, which is exactly what we're going for here. Now, how do I keep them from overcooking? Next step here is typically we're going to put it into a strainer and strain out the water. I'm going to just pour the water back into the bowl. Okay. Awesome. And then right here again, you can see that bright green. It's not cooked all the way through. It's not that deep dark brown. It's not mushy. It just has that bright green color. It's very distinct when you look at it. Next step, this is still cooking. Why? Because the pan's hot. So I'm going to move it into an ice bath. This is just ice water. Okay. So let me bring the bowl over here to the cutting board for you to see. So you're going to see I have ice water in here. This is going to cool it down. This is the blanching or the shocking side of it. So I blanched it. And now I want to make sure that it doesn't keep cooking. So to do that, you have to make it cold. And this is the fastest way that I can make it really, really cold. Okay. All right. Next step. All right, so in this pan, you can see the onions. It's starting to get a little bit clear. We're not getting browning on it. And that is actually what I'm going for because we're going to keep cooking. So I have my bacon almost ready. I have my onions almost ready. I still have that beautiful bacon fat in there, all that flavor ready to go. Now I'm going to turn the heat up. I'm going to crank it close to high. And now that I've cooled down my Brussels sprouts, I'm going to add them to the pan. What do I need to be careful with this? Or what part of this do I need to be careful with? I'm adding water to oil, okay? So I want to shake off as much water as possible before I add it in. Oil and water are not friends, and they tend to take it out on other people. So if you ever mix them in the same pan, they will fight back. So make sure you get as much of the water out as possible. All right, we're gonna do one more here. You can always take this and put it on a paper towel or put it in a you can put it in a strainer or a colander, but for the speed of this process, I'm going to go ahead and just shake the water off. All right. Beautiful. So now I have everything added back to the pan. I have it on high heat. I'm going to mix it together. So I'm going to saute it. You're going to see that fire coming up on the background with the gas grill. That's because that oil, like I said, oil and water don't get along. So that oil is trying to get out of the pan, get away from the water, and it's running into the fire, which creates that little bit of flame. Okay, I'm going to let it go for a little bit, and I'll bring it back over to the cutting board so we can see what we're working with. Beautiful. And here, I'm not necessarily looking for color. I'm not trying to get a dark brown on the outside of anything, but I am going to get it. If I can get to the golden brown point, awesome, but we just want a little bit of golden brown. We just want to make sure that those Brussels sprouts are cooked all the way through. Right. Almost there, I promise. I can't, it's very hard. I wish you could be here. You can hear it. One of the beauties of cooking is that you get to use every sense while you're cooking to tell if the food's ready. So you get to use touch to feel if it's ready. You get to use smell to feel to know if it's ready. You get to look at it to tell if it's ready. I can hear it sizzling right now, so I can tell what step it's at. It's a very interactive process. Okay, 30 more seconds, then I'll bring it back over to the cutting board. And then from there, we're going to make our maple glaze on top. And all that is, we're going to add our Dijon mustard, that little bit of acidity, and then that maple syrup. And it will, in that hot pan, without adding heat, it's going to reduce down and coat the Brussels sprouts, creating this beautiful, semi-sweet, semi-salty dish, a very well-balanced and semi-healthy. The Brussels sprouts are healthy. The bacon's 50-50. All right. Cool. So bring us back over to the cutting board. So you see that I have a nice even mix in this pan right here. You see I'm starting to get a little bit of color on the Brussels sprouts, which is what I'm going for, right? It was 80% cooked, and I just did that last 20% in the pan. Okay. So from here, go ahead. I'm going to move the cutting board so I can make sure that we can see all of this. I don't want to put a hot pan on a cutting board. They tend to melt, which is not good and expensive. So we're going to go ahead and use a pan. I'm going to put it on a safe surface, which is this metal table right here, or you can use towels and put it underneath. But I have the Brussels sprouts here. I have the bacon, I have the onions. It smells lovely. It smells earthy. It smells a little bit umami, savory. Great aroma coming from this. And now we're going to add that sweetness to it. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the tablespoon of Dijon mustard. And then second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pour over the 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. Again, this pan is hot. At this point, there's no need for me to add it back to the heat. And what I'm looking for is, you can see kind of on some of these, you can see that sheen coming from that maple syrup. And next, I just really want to mix it up. I want to make sure that mustard gets around. I want to make sure that maple syrup gets around. Beautiful, 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 beautiful smell here. You're starting to see that nice glaze form. So everything should reflect light is what I mean when I'm looking at the glaze. So I want a nice sheen to everything, and I want to see a little bit of that brightness coming from this dish. And then lastly, if you looked at the recipe, notice that I didn't have salt in the ingredients. Bacon is a very salty protein, so we want to be careful. You can definitely still add salt, but we want to make sure that we're tasting it before we add any salt. We do, however, want to add black pepper. And then doing this before, I know it's going to need just a little bit of salt. So I have this mixture of salt and pepper here. Typically, when you do this mixture, you want to do 4 to 1. So you would want a 1/4 cup of ground black pepper to 1 cup of salt, so that it's not too peppery. This one is a little bit heavier in the black pepper mixture because I don't want as much salt mixed in. Okay, so I've sprinkled the salt and black pepper on here. You can see that nice glaze from the maple syrup. You can see the bacon is cooked perfectly. You can see the leaves starting to fall off the Brussels sprouts. They're getting nice and tender, but they're not wilting. They're not going to be mushy. They're going to have a nice little crisp to it from the saute, right? And then last step, I'm going to make it beautiful. So we're going to put it on a plate. You can plate this however you would like. This is, again, a lovely side dish. Height. Anytime we do plating in the restaurant industry, height is a beautiful thing. Okay. So right here, you can see in the center of the plate, I have my mound, and then I'm going to come in and pinch the sides a little bit, make sure that I get a little bit of height and volume on that. As always, I'm going to work clean, make sure that I clean up my area. And I'm going to do one last pinch of our salt and black pepper on this to spread around the plate. And there you have your bacon, onion, maple, Brussels sprout side dish.